So the fourth lost opportunity we have just seen. Let's move on to the fifth lost opportunity here. Furthermore, a realized one has arisen in the world, but the person has been reborn in the borderlands, among the strange barbarian tribes, where monks, nuns, laymen and laywomen do not go. This is the fifth lost opportunity. That was like me. I was almost born in the borderland. Norway is like the barbarian tribes, the Vikings. That's right. Wow, I was very lucky to make it out to those barbarian tribes and come to the more civilized part of the world where they have Dhamma and these kind of things. So I'm not sure if barbarian is quite the right word. Milecha, it means people who don't understand the Aryan languages usually, so it may just mean foreign tribes. But anyway, barbarian or foreign. It's interesting how every culture thinks that we are the center of the world, everyone outside are the barbarians, right? The whole world is like that. Every culture thinks we are, like China is the middle kingdom, right? Everyone outside China were barbarians. India was the middle land. Everyone outside India were barbarians. The Greeks were the center of civilization in the world. Everyone outside of Greeks were barbarians. We're all the same. We're all equally self-centered, if you like. So that's the problem. Furthermore, a realized one has arisen in the world, and a person is reborn in the central country. There you are, the central country. I told you just a second ago, so there we are. The middle country, if you like. The Majjhima Padesa, it is known as in Pali. But they have wrong view and distorted perspective. There is no meaning in giving sacrifice or offerings. There is no fruit and result of good and bad deeds. There is no afterlife. There is no obligation to mother and father. No beings are reborn spontaneously. And there is no ascetic or Brahmin who is well attained and practiced and who describes the afterlife after realizing it with their own insight. It is the sixth lost opportunity here. This is a very common one. If you don't think that there are any ascetics or Brahmins who have practiced well and who actually describe the afterlife after realizing it with their own insight, it means you don't really believe there is a Buddha. It means you don't believe there is an Arahant. It means you don't have any faith in people who practice the spiritual path. And then there is no way out. You are trapped. The whole thing begins with faith in the Buddha, faith in the Dhamma, and if you are blocked off from that, then there is no chance. It's very interesting if you look at that description of those ascetics and Brahmins. They are well attained and well practiced. Okay, that's kind of fair enough. But the next sentence is incredibly interesting. They describe the afterlife. They describe rebirth. And so, in other words, what makes someone a really well-practiced spiritual practitioner is that they understand the idea of samsara, of samsaric existence. This is like the critical thing. This shows you once again how incredibly important the idea of rebirth is in the Dhamma. Only those ascetics and Brahmins who describe the afterlife, future existence, past existences, are actually worthy of that description. Of having realized things. This is the kind of one of the main insights. That's what it means. And I think one of the reasons why this is mentioned, it doesn't say that you have become an arahant or you have realized the Four Noble Truths. And the reason is, I think, because that is very hard to know or to understand or really figure out. What does that actually mean to understand the Four Noble Truths? You hear someone explain the Four Noble Truths and it's very hard to relate to that. The afterlife is something everyone can relate to. This is part of human speculation and human thought through immemorial times. It is always part of the human. What happens when you die? Every society, every religion, every part of the human society thinks about these things. These are fundamental aspects of our human culture. And so this is why this is mentioned here, because this is one of the ways in knowing whether someone really has proper insight or not. And so the afterlife, understanding deeply what that means, the idea of samsaric existence. So that is to me maybe the one that fits the best here. And the other ways are also, I think, part of that realization. Yeah, all of these things are kind of important. I've discussed many of these things here in brief before, or actually extendedly before as well. But this gives you an idea what some of the really important things in the Dhamma and the foundational things, if you like. Yeah. So if you don't believe in any of that, you have lost the opportunity because you won't believe that the Buddha is enlightened. Furthermore, a realized one has arisen in the world, and a person is reborn in the Majjhima Padesa, the central country. But they are witless, dull, stupid, unable to distinguish what is well said from what is poorly said. This is the seventh lost opportunity here. Yeah, some people are not, they're just stupid is one thing, but some people can be really intelligent and still they are kind of stupid. You know what I mean? Stupid intelligence. And this is such a common thing in the world. So you just don't get it when you hear the Dhamma. You don't think of it as being important. You are drawn in by the promise of worldly wealth and worldly good fortune instead of actually being promised and being drawn in by something far more important. So either you are witless and dull, or you are just intelligent in the wrong way, or whatever. You cannot distinguish what is well said from what is poorly said. Then you have a real problem. And a lot of people have this problem. That is why the number of Buddhists in the world is not that great. Because most people are not able to distinguish these things. So rare, right? So what about us? What about each one of us here? Well, presumably we are able to distinguish, at least to some extent, what is well spoken and what is poorly spoken. Otherwise you wouldn't be here, right? Otherwise, what's the point of being here? So congratulations for being here. However, the problem is, what about your next life? Are you still going to be as wise as you are in this life? Or are you going to be less wise in your next life? This is very hard to say. We don't know how things change. Remember, wisdom is not some fundamental thing that is always there. Ideally, you are wise now and you build it up to the maximum and you continue in your next life building up more. But that is not a given. That depends on the conditioning outside of you. I gave a talk last night on the lack of freedom of the will. And if there is no freedom of the will, then conditioning is everything, then you don't know what's going to happen to you. It is just very uncertain. And so this is the danger. Yes, okay, we have it together in this life to some extent, but that does not mean it will carry on in the future. And in the future, we may be, each one of us may be that person who is witless, dull, and stupid, and unable to distinguish the good from the bad. So remember that, this is not necessarily about other people, this is about us too. Furthermore, a Buddha has not arisen in the world, so he doesn't teach the Dhamma leading to peace, extinguishment, awakening, as proclaimed by the Buddha. And a person is reborn in the central country, and they are wise, bright, clever, and able to distinguish what is well said from what is poorly said. But this is the eighth lost opportunity. You have all the right faculties. Everything is ready, but there is no Buddha, and so there is no way out. Now you might think, well, that is the Bodhisattva, right? Maybe that's the Bodhisattva. They are wise, clever, and bright. But in a sense, this almost proves to you that there is no Bodhisattva path. Because if such a person existed, well, this is the kind of person you would expect to be a Bodhisattva, maybe. But actually, no. It is because there is no Buddha arising in the world, then there is no way out. This was the other point I was making also yesterday, this strange point that the spiritual path begins with the arising of a Buddha in the world. It's one of those weird things. Because the rising of the Buddha has got nothing to do with you. It just happens randomly every now and again. And yet your spiritual path begins with the arising of the Buddha. And this is what this is pointing to. You have all the right qualities, all the right things, but your spiritual path never starts. Why? Because there is no Buddha in the world. It only starts when there is a Buddha there. So this is a lost opportunity here. And most of the time in the world there is no Buddha around, and so then there's no chance for any practice. There is no Buddha around now? The Buddha is here. Is it right there? Yeah. So we still have the teaching. Yeah, it takes a while for the teaching to die out. So we still have the presence of the Buddha, I would say. Okay. Mendicants, there is just one opportunity for spiritual practice. What is that? It's when a Buddha has arisen in the world, perfected and fully awakened, the Buddha, accomplished in knowledge and conduct, holy knower of the world, supreme guide for those who wish to train, teacher of gods and humans, awakened and blessed. He teaches the Dhamma leading to peace, extinguishment, awakening, as proclaimed by the Holy One, the Sugata. And a person is reborn in the central country, and they are wise, bright, clever, and able to distinguish what is said, well said, from what is poorly said. This is the one opportunity for spiritual practice. And so what that means is that the chances of spiritual practice are very, very slim. How often is it that you happen to be reborn as a human compared to reborn somewhere else? Yeah, I mean, you go to Devaloka, you stay there a few million years, and you compare that to the 100 years or 80 years or whatever it is that you have as a human being, it's only a fraction of the time that you are available here. Or if you are unfortunate to get reborn as a ghost, yeah, you might be a ghost for a long time. And so the amount of time you get reborn as a human is quite small compared to other rebirths. And then even if you are a human being, it is very rare that the Buddha exists here. So if you multiply those two with each other, guess what? That's what you have to do. You have to multiply them with each other to get the full probability. It's incredibly small. Yeah, the probability of being a human multiplied by the probability of there being a Buddha, and you are kind of multiplied by the probability of you being smart enough to understand the message. And after a while, this equation, we get some smart mathematician in the BGF to calculate this, and see what we can do. And you can see that the chances of actually being able to listen to the Dhamma in a wise way is actually incredibly, incredibly small. And this is kind of the whole point of this set of conditions that the Buddha lays out, is to give us a sense of urgency. If we don't do it now, what happens is that you carry on this kind of carousel of rebirth, going round and round, not really knowing what you're going to do, not knowing, going down, going suffering here, suffering there, suffering more, suffering less. You get a kind of a holiday in heaven, and then you come back to suffering again afterwards, in this kind of way. And it's kind of very concerning, because next time around, when the next Buddha is, no idea. And maybe you become like Upaka, you see the Buddha, but you walk off in the wrong direction, like we mentioned the other day, It's kind of scary, isn't it? It is really, really concerning. And so the Buddha is saying, please take the opportunity. The Dhamma is available in the world. It is there for us, and that's kind of extraordinary. We should be so happy and elated that the Dhamma is available. We should take this opportunity right now because of that. So please do that. It is never too late to practice. Most of you are not super duper old. You are still kind of have a few good years ahead of you. Maybe a few good decades ahead of you. Take that time. And before you know it, it is too late. One day you wake up and you are too old. Too old now. Okay, oh well. That's what happens in life. One day you wake up and you are, I think old age is a bit like that. One day you just wake up and you're old all of a sudden, and that's it. So this is the message of the sutta, the danger of samsara, and how hard it is to get out, how trapped we tend to be, because the chances of a Buddha and you being around at the same time is actually very, very small. There were lots of human beings in the world already at the time of the Buddha, but most of them were born elsewhere. They were not in India. They were, all the other parts of the world, And in those days, they didn't have a choice. There was no traveling to the India saying, wait a minute, I've heard there's Dhamma in India. I don't think that happened 2,500 years ago. And so nothing really happened. But maybe it did happen. I wonder. Maybe people from the faraway countries, they came to India because they heard a Buddha had arisen. I don't know. Maybe there were some people like that. Not entirely sure. Anyway, that's a different story. Kind of interesting. There are some indication that some of the people who were disciples of the Buddha didn't look like Indians. Yeah, there was one person who was supposed to be quite white compared to the other ones. What? Yeah, they could have been Greeks, right? But you also wonder whether they could have been Chinese people as well. China is not that far away, yeah. And so you Greeks, Chinese, you don't know, but they were paler skin color. At least one of them was famous. I think that was Venerable. What's his name now? Kapina, I think. I think he was supposed to be exceptionally pale. And there was someone wrote an essay wondering whether he might be a Greek or something, or something like that, because there was already some interaction between these countries. China, I'm not sure if there was interaction, but with the Greeks, it is well known that there was interaction via the Persian Empire. The Archimedean Empire had already existed prior to the time of the Buddha for about 100 years. And Persepolis, the capital of that empire, was a meeting ground between the Eastern and the Western world, and it was a mixture of all kinds of people. Europeans and Indians specifically met there. And so maybe this Kapina was a Greek who heard, oh, a Buddha, that's very interesting. Okay, I'll go to India. I don't know. Maybe, yeah, it is possible. So the world is much more... The ancient world is actually much more interesting than we think it is. There were many more things happening, much more movement around, more commerce, etc., movement of ideas, and sometimes we believe. And there is some research in that area, actually. Yeah. Anyway, so... Okay, good enough. So then we have a few verses at the end. So let me just read out those verses. When you have gained the human state and the true teaching has been so well proclaimed, if you don't seize the moment, it'll pass you by. For many wrong times are spoken of, which obstruct the path. Only on rare occasions do the realized ones arise. If you find yourself in their presence, so hard to find in the world, and if you have gained the human birth and the teaching of the Dhamma, that is enough to make an effort for a person who loves themselves. Do you love yourself? Good, I'm glad to hear that. So that means you should practice, yeah? This is kind of how you show your sense of self-worth and self-value, by practicing the Dhamma. How is the true teaching to be understood so that the moment doesn't pass you by? For if you miss your moment, you will grieve when sent to hell. If you fail to achieve certainty regarding the true teaching, you will regret it for a long time, like a trader who loses a profit. That doesn't sound enough, right? Trader who loses, well, that's kind of a small thing. But if you don't gain certainty regarding the true teaching, in other words, you don't become a stream enterer, you will regret it for a long time afterwards, like a trader who loses everything. A man shrouded by ignorance, or a person shrouded by ignorance, a failure in the true teaching, would long undergo transmigration through birth and death. Shrouded in ignorance, yeah, this is one of those things. Hindered by ignorance, blocked by ignorance. The Pali word is something like nivuto, I think, and it means like blocked by ignorance. Blocked by delusion might be even better. That blocking by delusion means that you fail in the true teaching because you cannot see what actually is there. Those who have gained the human state, when the true teaching has been so well proclaimed, and have completed what the teacher taught, or will do so, or are doing so now, have realized the right time in the world for the supreme spiritual life. You should live guarded, ever mindful, not soaked in defilements. That's nice, isn't it? I've never seen that before. This must be one of Bhante Sujato's kind of new translations. Soaked in defilements. Among those restrained ones who have practiced the path, proclaimed by the realized one, the one with vision, and taught by the kinsman of the sun. The kinsman of the sun is the Buddha, Aditya Bandhu. Bandhu is like a kinsman, Aditya is the sun. Having cut off all underlying tendencies that follow those drifting in Mara's dominion, they are the ones in this world who have truly crossed over, having reached the ending of defilements. Mara's dominion, it means Mara is your lord, Mara is in charge of you, and you are the slave. You say, yes, Mara, and you run around looking for new sensual pleasures here and there and everywhere, never finding satisfaction, always suffering in various ways, and this is the problem. So be cut off from Mara's dominion, and then you have crossed over, reached the ending of defilements. So, there you are. That's the 8 non-occasions and the 1 occasion for practicing the Dhamma. Let us move on. And we now come to a sutta called Decline. Wow, a very depressing suttas today. Okay. There, Sariputta addressed the mendicants, the reverends mendicants. Reverend there replied, Venerable Sariputta said this, Reverends, they speak of a person liable to decline and one not liable to decline. But how did the Buddha define a person liable to decline and one not liable to decline? So this is very interesting. So now we can hopefully find out how to avoid being liable to decline. So let's have a look, see what happens next. Reverend, we would travel a long way to learn the meaning of this statement in the presence of Venerable Sariputta. May Venerable Sariputta himself please clarify the meaning of this. The mendicants will listen and remember it. Then listen and pay close attention. I will speak. Yes, Reverend, they replied, and Venerable Sariputta said this. I kind of like this idea. We would travel a long way to learn the meaning of this. And probably a short sutta, and they will travel hundreds of kilometers by foot just to remember one short sutta. And so that's kind of good news. So important, Dhamma really matters. You would do anything at all to gain some real deep insight into Dhamma. We live in the golden age of Dhamma because Dhamma is available everywhere, and yet still, even now, it can be useful to travel a bit to get the real Dhamma. So, what does he say? I can't remember what he says. That's a bit exciting for me as well. So, how did the Buddha define a person liable to decline? It's when a mendicant doesn't get to hear a teaching they haven't heard before. They forget those teachings they have heard, and they don't keep rehearsing the teachings they have already got to know, and they don't come to understand what they haven't understood before. That's how the Buddha defines a person liable to decline. And this is such a common problem, I think, in Buddhism as well. Sometimes we start out on the Buddhist path and we are really keen. It is really exciting and really new and really brilliant. And after a while you think, I've heard it all before. And so you stop hearing new teachings. You forget those teachings you have already heard. You think that you know them. You think that they are there. But actually you start forgetting them. I've noticed that happening in myself. I can't remember now anymore what's going on there. You stop really rehearsing, or keep reading the suttas again and again and again. And so you start declining instead. So this is why, one of the reasons why I enjoy giving these sutta retreats, even though maybe it is a little bit too many suttas sometimes, I have to admit, suttas all day long, it might be too much. But still, it is nice because it is a great reminder of what the Buddha was teaching here, and it kind of re-establishes things. And very often we do need to hear the same thing again and again. The trick is to hear it with a new ears, with a new mind, kind of sweep out the rubbish in the mind, clear things away, and try to hear things afresh, because these things have deep meanings usually. Yeah, just the sutta we saw now about the 8 opportunities is actually a very deep sutta. And it takes time to fully appreciate what that means. It takes time before the sense of urgency arises in the mind. We have to do this, think about it many times before it really starts to happen. And so we need to come back to these teachings again and again and again. I'm really surprised. I've been reading the suttas for over 30 years now. And when I read them, I still see things I haven't seen before. Or I see things in a new way, like it opens up a new avenue for seeing things, after 30 years. And this is one of the reasons why it is still enjoyable to read the suttas. Suddenly I gain a deeper appreciation of what is happening. Suddenly it sinks into a new level. Suddenly the sense of urgency becomes more apparent. And this is kind of what this really is about. And so don't think that you have read it all, now it's boring. No, go back to the beginning here. There are so many suttas, 10,000 pages, and usually by the time you get to page 10,000, you've forgotten page 1 anyway. So go back to page 1 again. Let's have a 5-minute break.
Ajahn, just a question of curiosity. Can I say this way? Just how Ajahn mentioned that if one does certain things that normally people don't do, then they will have more merits. For example, one caretaker of a funeral parlor, someone who takes care of the body, residents who stay within the vicinity of a cemetery, and they share merit with the lost souls. Am I correct?
So you reckon that is a good job because no one else wants to do it, and so you are doing it. It depends on the situation, So it depends on how they got those jobs, how their minds are inclining, whether they are doing it because they see that there is a need and so they take up the job. It depends on the circumstances. So for example, here if Shuling says that we need someone to clean the toilets but no one else wants to do it, and then you raise your hand, then it's kind of good because you are doing something that no one else is doing. And that is one of the characteristics for making good karma. In the sense of the cemetery, it depends on how it comes about, whether there is a need, whether you're coming from a good purpose, or whether that is your job. It's all kind of factors that kind of depend on the degree of good merit that you're making in that situation. But if you want to go to the cemetery, you think, wow, it needs a cleaning up, and you clean up your own grave, not your own grave, your family grave. It's nice to have a grave ready for yourself. But you also clean up the neighbor's grave, right? Because there's a neighbor grave and you kind of help out. If you do that sort of thing, it's very beautiful because then you are doing something that you're not really expected to do. You're just helping out in general. So this is kind of how it comes about,
In page 53, it says, the Buddhas of the past and the future. So does it mean that Gautama Buddha predict a future Buddha like Maitreya Buddha?
He didn't predict, I would say. There is one reference to Maitreya Buddha in the Pali Suttas, and that reference is a bit uncertain because the parallel sutta in Chinese does not have a reference to the Buddha at that point. And so I would say that there is no prediction. But it doesn't really matter because the point about Buddhas is that they arise at regular intervals. There will be Buddhas in the world because Buddhas are just natural phenomena like us. They arise occasionally because cause and conditions come together, and then you get a Buddha in the world. That's kind of how Buddhas arise. So it doesn't matter whether that Buddha is called Maitreya or not, but it makes it more uncertain. Once you have a name, it's like it creates a degree of perception in your mind. Yes, a Buddha will arise. As if you know something about it, that will kind of increase the likelihood or something like that. But in reality, it's just that there will be Buddhas arising. Whether that Buddha is called Maitreya or not is kind of irrelevant. But we know there will be Buddhas in the future. I think one of the problems there is that it isn't said when that Buddha will be, some kind of future eon, so it's kind of uncertain anyway. Yeah, so there will be Buddhas, but we don't know when. Could be a long time. Yeah.
Last question, Ajahn.
Yeah.
Do you know why places of spiritual, like India, Israel, the country is what you call poor, more conflicts? Why is it so?
Why is it so? Well, Israel is spiritual. Israel is just true. It's full of Christianity and Islam and Judaism, all these kind of things. But for me, India is a much more spiritual country, because India is where people are really seeking deep spirituality in a much more profound sense. Israel is all about believing in a God, a creator God. It's a kind of different kind of spirituality than the deeper kind of seeking, which has to do with spiritual practice very often. Christianity doesn't really have all that much spiritual practice. Okay, you go to church or whatever, but it doesn't really have doesn't have an eightfold path or anything like that. This is very unique to Buddhism and the Dhamma. And so to me, India is really the spiritual country, and India has gone through many different things. At times it has been very wealthy, At the time of Ashoka, it was the greatest empire in the world. It was this amazing empire. In the past, India has also been very wealthy when they traded. Okay, in recent years, recent decades, it hasn't been so great. Maybe partly caused by British imperialism, taking it over. That was probably part of the reason why it declined. But now it's on the rise again. India's doing really well right now. So I think it's just that the historical things, it's kind of things go up, things go down, and I don't think it has anything to do with spiritual countries being prone to violence or anything like that. But one of those things that is a little bit interesting is the strange thing that you find in the suttas, that a Buddha always arises in India. Jambudvipa. So the Buddha always arises in Jambudvipa. Jambudvipa is the rose apple land or the black plum land or something like that. And that's kind of strange. You wonder, how is that possible? Because there's a different eon. In a different eon, it's like the universe has collapsed and re-expanded. It doesn't make any sense to talk about India because it's just another planet, and it will probably form in a different way. So how can you talk about India in a different eon? There's two possibilities. Either maybe the globe forms in exactly the same way, and so India looks exactly the same. But then you have plate tectonics, so everything is moving around anyway. So the whole thing doesn't really make any sense. And so my interpretation of that, which maybe is a bit dodgy, you can tell me afterwards if you think it's dodgy or not. But my interpretation is that India, the word India, represents a particular kind of culture, a culture in which Buddhas can re-arise. And a Buddha cannot just re-arise anywhere. If you come to, I don't know if Buddhas can arise here in KL, it's kind of maybe not so likely, or in Perth for that matter. What's the chance of a Buddha arising in Perth? I would say it's zero. But India is a kind of society, at least it was then, 2,500 years ago, where this might happen, because you have a respect for the samanas, you have a respect for the ascetic tradition of people wandering around. As a samana, there was a samana culture. People did become ascetics, and they just begged for alms, and people would give them food and support them for that. There was spiritual practice that was already very advanced. They already had meditation that was equivalent to the jhanas and the deep Brahma viharas. And so they were very close to enlightenment. All they missed was this tiny bit of right view. And once they got that right view, they could make the progress. And so I would say a Buddha is likely to arise in that kind of culture, because all the supporting conditions are there. And so it's more likely that someone will be able to make the breakthrough because the supporting conditions are there. If there are no supporting conditions, then the chances of being able to gain that sort of insight will be very small. So that's kind of how I interpret that. It is a reference to a particular culture rather than a particular place, if you like.
Ajahn.
So.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
How long would the Buddha Sasana last? What are the criteria for the Buddha Sasana to exist? Because nowadays with IT, the teachings are stored on the cloud or in the digital format. so it can last maybe a long time? Will it be like maybe in the future we don't have any more monks, then we have part-time monks, you know?
Dodgy monks, so to say.
Whatever.
Yeah. I don't know if the storage on the cloud is it good or bad, to be honest with you. I don't know. I'm not sure if I know enough about that. But they say that usually storage on electronic means is actually very unreliable. It changes all the time. There's too much uncertainty with it. So I don't know if it's good or bad. And I suspect actually it's bad, to be honest with you, and that there will be more problems with it. But one of the important things that the Buddha says in the suttas is that the Dhamma does not disappear all at once, like a ship sinks. A ship, when it sinks, it goes boom, straight down, very, very fast. But the Dhamma disappears gradually. And the Buddha compares it to fake gold. When you have counterfeit gold, then the value of real gold disappears, because the counterfeit gold takes its place. So real gold disappears. Same thing with the Dhamma, you get counterfeit Dhamma. Wrong view, basically. And when you get that wrong view in the world, then the real Dhamma starts to reduce in value, because the counterfeit Dhamma arises. And I see a lot of that in the world, a lot of counterfeit Dhamma, in my opinion. Things that are not based on right view, things that are doesn't have all the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, things that have misunderstandings about the nature of Samadhi and Nibbana, these kind of things. And that is really problematic. So that is the right way. So it's kind of a gradual decline. It's very hard to say exactly when it stops. But I think we are going down pretty fast. That's my kind of understanding of it. Yeah.
Bande, today when we talk about the teachings of the Buddha, we're always referring to Gautama. But is there any reference to Kassapa during the time of Siddhartha before he was enlightened, that the last Buddha before him was, if I am not mistaken, Kassapa? So there was no mention that there was any teachings of Buddha Kassapa left behind, because they were just talking about teachings of meditation, Alara Kalama and all that, but none of it had anything to do with the previous Buddha.
I would agree,
So how could a person like Siddhartha become enlightened if they were not referring to some teachings left behind by a previous Buddha?
I think the answer is that sometimes people become enlightened on their own, basically. So they are. That's why the whole idea of the Bodhisattva comes about. It comes about because of that. And Pacceka Buddhas as well, exactly. But the problem is that once that reality is accepted, then the whole idea of Bodhisattva path comes around. But just because there are occasionally people who become Buddhas does not mean that there is a path to becoming a Buddha. I think that's a misunderstanding. I don't think there is such a path. It just happens more or less randomly because someone happens to have the right qualities and society has the right qualities. All these qualities come together. It produces a Buddha, not because there is a path, not because you take a vow or make an aspiration as the ascetic Sumedha under Buddha Dipankara for incalculable eons ago. There is there's no reason to believe that from the suttas. The Buddha doesn't really even talk about this. This is a later development that happens in Buddhism. And I think it's a dangerous development. I think that is part of the wrong kind of Dhamma in the world, to be honest with you. This idea of bodhisattvas is dangerous because it destroys your practice. It damages the practice. You're no longer focusing on the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. You focus on things that are completely, outside of that, and you start doing things that are not really conducive to enlightenment. And so I think these things are, to my mind, a sidetrack and dangerous things. Anyway,
Ajahn.
There you are.
I heard another Ajahn was telling during his Dhamma talk. He said that currently a lot of people are chasing against Dhamma talk. They go to one Dhamma talk after another one. But his belief is that we should, every time we learn a new Dhamma, we should actually learn, understand, recollect, and contemplate and practice until you get it. And then only you proceed to, another Dhamma. So what is your thought on this?
Yes, that is actually true. That's actually what the Buddha himself says, that we should listen carefully, recollect what you have heard, think about it, reflect on it, and gradually it becomes part of your view, part of your way of looking at the world. And that is exactly what the Buddha says in the suttas. But you shouldn't necessarily understand it fully, because that may never happen. You may never understand it fully, right? Because that means becoming a stream mentor, basically. But we should. There's a tendency in the world to listen to too many Dhamma talks. We use it as a kind of entertainment, or we use it as a way of getting out of suffering, or whatever it is. Or I don't know what to do. Put on a Dhamma talk, and it's very common. I remember my good friend Bhante Sujato, who lives in Sydney. And he once wrote this piece which said, "You are listening to too many Dhamma talks." That was the thing that he wrote. And he is right. Instead of kind of listening properly and kind of hearing occasional Dhamma talks and really taking on board, we kind of turn it on as some kind of background music, like lift music, kind of always on. And you don't really listen properly, don't take it on board properly. So it's not ideal. But on the other hand, the reality is that for many people, the minds are quite distracted, and it can be very hard to really take in the Dhamma. And so you listen, and maybe you don't listen so clearly. So I don't want to be too judgmental what people do. I think that's also bad. And so you do what you can, but you try to lean in that direction towards listening properly and reflecting, and allowing it to become part of your outlook, so to speak. Yeah.